Hello, everyone, and welcome again to another Teacher Joseph podcast. Today's phrase is to be probed or to probe. Now, this literally means when you take a mechanical instrument and you prod it against something. So let me just give you some examples. So imagine you're a doctor and someone comes to you and says, "Oh, I have this big thing on my arm, like a spot or a blemish," and you get your tool and you start to push it to see what's in there. Maybe you want to burst it just to see what's there. Also, if you work in a factory and there's a big machine and it's not working properly, you can probe it. You can look around it. You can get your tools out. You can try to work out why it's not working for you. That is to probe. Or in the passive voice, you can say that the machine is being probed by the boss. Now, the most common way to use this is as a metaphor. When something breaks down, whether it's a rule or a policy or a government issue, or even when people are not working to their capacity, what they could be doing, there's often a probe. And in this case, it means like an investigation as to why something isn't working the way that it should. So today's main news story says Prozac is among 30 drugs to be probed over some kind of link to suicide and self-harm. And we're going to read through this story together. And this story today is from the British newspaper, The Independent. Okay, it says, concerns raised by families over the safety of most commonly used antidepressants force an official review. Now, let me just explain a little bit there. So first of all, antidepressants or antidepressants, that's the medication some people take to stop them being depressed. It says concerns raised by families over the safety of the most commonly used antidepressants. So the most common ones, okay, like Prozac, there's being concerns raised by families over their safety because these medicines are being given to everyone. And the story continues that they're being given to children as young as 4 years old. So let's continue reading this. It says, more than 30 of the most common antidepressants prescribed in the UK are to be reviewed by the medicines regulator, as figures point to hundreds of deaths linked to suicide and self-harm among people taking them. The medicines, which include Prozac, will be looked at by the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, and it will look into the effectiveness of the warnings which these medicines carry. So, you know, these medicines often have a warning on them. So it doesn't say they're going to remove the medicines. It looks like they're going to be changing the warning on them. It says there were 85 million prescriptions, that's the note from the doctor, prescribed, that's the verb we use when the doctor gives medicine. There were 85 million prescriptions for antidepressants in England in 2022-23. That's up from 58 million in 2015-2016. So, yeah, big concerns there over Prozac. So, we'll just read that first part again. Concerns raised by families over the safety of the most commonly used antidepressants forces an official review by the government after hundreds of these things have been prescribed, some to children as young as 4 years old. Well, that's quite worrying, isn't it? But to be honest with you, I'm not surprised, because here, our National Health Service, if you can't work, I mean, the doctor doesn't have time to sit there for hours asking if you're okay. It's much easier just to hand you a bottle of pills and tell you to come back in a month. And that's the way they treat depression here. And if it goes on for a long time, they may refer you to some kind of mental health professional, although they're severely underfunded. And if there's no danger to your life, there's a good chance you won't see anyone. So there's a big issue with that, and lots of people are talking about it. Speaking of talking, do you remember the 1980s sitcom, the comedy called Cheers? This was the one with Ted Danson in a bar. You might remember it because there was, I think, 2 men, 1 woman, and a waitress who was very funny. It was Ted Danson, and I can't remember the lady's name. There was a Red Indian standing at the door of the pub, and I think Fraser was there before he got his own TV show. In English, it's called Cheers, and it says here that Woody Harrelson and Ted Danson, the actors from Cheers, are launching a new podcast together. The 62-year-old actor has joined forces with his former Cheers co-star to create Where Everybody Knows Your Name, which launches on June 12th. Ted Danson, 76, who played Sam Malone on Cheers, said, "Though I've always dreaded small talk at a cocktail party, I found that it is a genuine privilege to sit down with someone for a deep, uninterrupted conversation." So if you like podcasting, Ted Danson and Woody Harrelson are going to be doing a new podcast. I'm not sure if they're going to be talking about Cheers specifically, but it's called Where Everybody Knows Your Name, which of course was the theme tune from the TV show. Very interesting that, isn't it? Very interesting. So yeah, that'll be coming your way soon. And I must admit, it's getting really harder and harder to find people to listen to us, isn't it? Because of the way we live these days. So that'll be very good. And by the way, if you like 1980s TV shows, I see Tom Sellick from Magnum He's been writing his memoir, his memories. It says here, Tom Sellick wrote his new memoir entirely by hand. The actor, 79, revealed his book called You Never Know was created that way because he just can't think when he's sitting in front of a keyboard. The Magnum private investigator legend said, I've always written that way, and it's the only way I know how to write. And then he says, it makes it much more personal. I know that there were private things that I needed to share. So he's basically saying to write them by hand is much easier. Oh, very interesting. Very interesting. And there's a few other stories today. You know, after anyone discovers that something is wrong, there's always a probe. So as you can imagine, the government have a full job on their hands, probing different things which aren't working. So that's in the newspaper today as well. Also, another interesting thing from the UK, as you know, when there's a court case here, like most other countries, I think, members of the public can be asked to go and to be on the jury panel to decide if the person is guilty or not. And jurors, as they're called, are often just called by the government. They receive a letter and they're told, okay, you need to be at the court on this date at this time, and if we select you, you will be a member of the jury for a trial. And the only way you can get out of it is if you tell them you have a doctor's appointment or something like this. So anyway, jurors are often faced with distressing court cases, but now the government is saying, according to this news report, the jurors in distressing court cases are going to be offered counselling and round-the-clock support. Yeah, well, that just means a special telephone helpline will be set up for them. You know, when you work for any company, there's often a 24-hour number you can call if you feel stressed or depressed. And I've noticed that used to be the role of the human resources officer. You know, that used to be the job of the personnel manager. And then somewhere, I think in the 1990s, American psychology was embraced, and all of our personnel departments suddenly became human resources departments, and their jobs were changed into streamlining spreadsheets, ensuring the employer was supported. But before that, the personnel departments used to be very strong in supporting employees here. If the employee had a problem, he could chat to personnel, and the personnel department would mediate between the employer and the employee, usually taking the employee's side. But these days, of course, that's all gone. Now you work in an HR department, human resources, and those departments are there to ensure that the company has the support it needs to manage the employees. And things like staffing, stress levels, or difficulties are simply outsourced to a private telephony company who can counsel people on the telephone, so you don't get to talk to anyone local. But anyway, let's read through this report here just before we finish. It says, jurors in distressing court cases will be offered counselling and round-the-clock support under a new scheme. The Ministry of Justice said they would be entitled to 6 free therapy sessions and have access to a 24-hour telephone line. Specialists will provide emotional aid, advice, and information. The 10-month pilot scheme, that just means test scheme, I suppose, this summer will begin at 15 courts to help those who have sat through harrowing cases. That just means cases that are difficult, and then it gives examples of what those might be. This is only for England and Wales. I'm not sure what the situation is in Northern Ireland and Scotland. It says if successful, it could be rolled out across England and Wales. And the Ministry of Justice said it would provide further reassurance that those who hear distressing evidence of murder, abuse and cruelty will get the support when they need it. Well, if they want to give me further security, just don't ask me to do it. I'm very happy to say I've never been called up for jury service, although I have to say I know someone who's been called up around 3 times now. So whatever system they use for this, it's not very selective. Well, I suppose, I mean, I have been away for many years, so they wouldn't be able to call me up when I'm not in the country. But yeah, you just receive a letter one day. It's very disturbing, saying, come to the court on a specific day. And for people who are self-employed, like me, I think they do refund you your salary, or at least part of it. But it's a very complex procedure. I'd rather just not do it. And there we are. That's it. So that's the phrase of today, probe. And they've obviously been probing how people are feeling after distressing court cases. There's been a probe, to use a noun, and they've come up with this new pilot. So that's the news today from the UK. I hope you've enjoyed this, and let's talk soon. See you. Bye.